Let me get live on here. I think we're live there. Checking connection. I think we're good there. All right. Just going to give it a minute or two for some people to get in. All right. Get this going in a minute. All right. All right. We'll get started in a minute. What's going on? Serpent-headed mask. What's going on, brother? Source conduit. What's going on? Just going to give it another minute. I'm going to run through some announcements, and then we'll go ahead and get into it. All right, there you go. Cool. Some water. All right. All right. Give it another minute or two. Last minute, as usual. Wasn't planned. I think everything should be set up good. Everything looks good. Sound looks good. We are live on Instagram. And we are, why is that doing that? There we go. Okay, get it. Man, Instagram be doing this funky shit. We don't care. All right. All right, so we are live on Instagram also on Primordial Chaos 9 on Instagram. And then obviously here on YouTube. For anybody that is or comes in and is tuning in on Instagram, if you want to participate live, you can come over to the YouTube. I'll try to pay attention to both sides for questions, but sometimes I don't see it. Also, if you are a member of the YouTube channel, your questions will come up to the top. Subscribers first. And if you are a member of the Primordial Chaos YouTube channel, your questions will automatically come to the front. So you can subscribe to the YouTube channel now to support. There's 3 different levels just to show your support. So, yeah. That option is available. All right, so let me run through some quick announcements and then I'll get right into it and try to keep this to about an hour, hour and a half, hopefully. I know I say that all the time, just depending, but I will try my best. All right, just to run through a series of events. We have 2 more events for this month. Let me just, which is coming up actually, I don't need to pull it up. It's coming up actually this weekend on Friday. Friday night, May 27th, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have the Ritual of Abaddon the Destroyer. That'll be Friday night at 8 o'clock. That is for Patreon members only, tier 3 and above. So if you want to have access or participate in that ritual, you need to go to the Patreon page. Check out the Patreon page, patreon.com/Baniti, Baniti. Again, that's patreon.com/Baniti, Baniti. I recommend tier 3. Tier 3 gives you access to the monthly classes. And it gives you access to the monthly ritual. Also, when you do join and become a member, you have access to all of the prior classes and rituals before the date you join. So you can go back to the very first. You'll have access to the very first class up until the present moment. And then obviously you'll have access to the future classes moving forward. So again, I recommend you check out tier 3 on the Patreon page. and it's much cheaper. Rather than pay for classes individually, you'll get access to all the monthly classes, which is 2 to 3 per month. All right, so check that out. That's this Friday night, Abaddon, the Destroyer Ritual. And then the next day on Saturday, May 28th, p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the Eastern Left-Hand Path Occult class number 3. This is an ongoing series. This is the third, which we're covering various different aspects of Eastern Left-Hand Path, occult magic, working with Ahriman, Melek Taus, a variety of those different left-hand path practices, working with the jinn. We're kind of going into it, bouncing around a bit, but staying focused on specific areas of interest because it's obviously a very vast topic. So that'll be class number 3. Again, if you do join the Patreon, you have access to the previous ones in the series. I do recommend for those on Patreon or those who do join Patreon in the future, you should get caught up on those ongoing series classes, especially the shadow work classes, because some of these classes have assignments and rituals and work, especially the shadow work class, which we're approaching number 7. We've done 6 already. And you're going to be kind of behind. And the way the class is sequenced, it's not going to really work as beneficial as it can for you if you're following it in order. Now, some people have joined late and have went back and done the work, and that's fine. You can do it in your own time. And I totally understand. Everybody lives in different states, different time zones, even different countries with some people that I deal with. So I know not everybody can be there when we do the class live. But I do encourage you to get caught up if you are on Patreon and you're still catching up on some of these ongoing series. Very important, especially the shadow work class. And if you're thinking about joining or you do join, you definitely want to get caught up, especially on that class. All right. So those are the 2 final events that'll close out the month of May. I will be posting probably at the end of the week in the next few days, June's classes and rituals. That'll be posted within the next few days. As soon as I get some time to get around to work with that, that'll go up very shortly. And that'll be for the month of June. And I'm going to say it should be up by Thursday or Friday, hopefully, just depending on what's going on. But look for that to come very soon. I also want to throw out there, if you are interested in a Klipothic demonic reading, I offer various different forms of those readings. Santa Muerte and the Spirit of the Dead reading. Everything I'm saying is in the description box. Also, if you are interested in a Egyptian oracle reading, if you're interested in a deity reading to see what deities walk with you, shadow work readings, which has been very, very busy with that the last several months, which is a great recommended place to start. I always bring this up and I'll continue to bring it up. People always ask, where should I start? Where should I begin? Well, shadow work readings, in addition to the shadow work class that we're doing on Patreon, that's a great place to start because it's going to uncover aspects of yourself that you need to work on, things that you need to address. That's the proper place to start, regardless of what other people will tell you. Basically, you can do whatever you want, as I've said, but if you want to do it the right way, and I say the right way in the sense that you'll get the most beneficial results, that's the way to go. So shadow work reading is a good place to start, taking the shadow work classes, because that's the number one question you get over the years. Where do I begin? I just came on this path. Where do I start? Where do I begin? Well, that's where you begin. It's that simple. I know people will ask questions like, can you recommend a book? What should I do this? It doesn't work like that. When you do uncover the shadow or the hidden self and you address those things that come up, that's the correct place to start. It's that simple. Don't make it more complex than it is, but people will do that. All right, but for a full list of any of the spiritual readings, you'll see the email in the description box, khnum19@gmail.com. You can reach out to me, email me there. Everything that I'm saying is posted not only here in the YouTube page in the description box, it's also in the community section on my YouTube page. You could also go to the Instagram page, Primordial Chaos 9, Facebook, Primordial Chaos, and stay updated on all the latest classes, Patreon events, readings, anything that's we're doing is on there. All right, so check out those platforms, support those platforms. Again, I want to throw out there Journey of the Black Adept Conference, as Believe it or not, this year flying by. We're already approaching the month of June. And before we know it, the summer will be gone, fall will be here, and it will be time for that conference again as we get into October. So that will be October 27th to the 30th. It is always the last weekend in the month of October. Whatever date that falls on, you can mark that down, put it on your calendar. We keep it that same time every year so people can plan as far out as they want to, because obviously understood that flights and lodging can be very expensive, depending on when you book your trip. So we put that out there as early as we can. As soon as the previous conference is over, we start promoting the next one, and we've been doing that for the last few months. So that will take place the 27th to the 30th. On October 27th, which is Thursday night, there will be a meet and greet like we did previous years. On Friday and Saturday, classes, workshops, presentations with rituals, group rituals on Friday and Saturday night. Excuse me. And then on Sunday, late Sunday morning, early Sunday afternoon, we close it out with a open question and answer discussion, which is basically a free fall to ask whatever questions, especially about what took place over the 3 days of the events. So you can start planning for that. If you need any information on that, as far as recommendations of areas to stay, best airports to fly into, things of that nature, you can shoot me an email and we'll try to assist to the best of our ability that we can with that. It will be in Hollywood, Florida again, where we had it last year. It'll be right near downtown Hollywood, Florida, which is very close to Fort Lauderdale Hollywood Airport. Not 5-10 minute ride from the airport. So it's a great location. Don't have to travel far, and you have access to the beaches, to shopping, restaurants. You're in a prime area where you can do some things on the side. And also, if you want to go into the heart of downtown Miami, you have that access too. It's a prime location, so it will be there. All right. So prepare for that. We look to see some newer people this year. Since we went back to this past year doing it back again in person, had a bigger turnout than we expected. The 2 years prior to that, we had close to over 30 people before the COVID shutdown. I think we had about 15 or 16 this past year, and I expect probably grow even more. So it's a great event where you can come and, again, fellowship with people, network with people, and do ritual work, because as you know, we're a small, tight-knit community, right? So that's that. And then last but not least, also check out the Primordial Chaos podcast, which is pretty much available on all podcast platforms, Spotify, Amazon, Radio Public, pretty much all the major ones. I've got to get back on that. I haven't done one in about 4 weeks. Planned on doing one yesterday. Didn't work out. So I'll be posting some new content on there too. All right. That pretty much covers the announcements that I want to run through. Hold on. Drop something here. I was looking for it. I got it. All right. So frontal blessings to all. So I want to welcome everybody that is here. If I didn't greet you by name, I know Serpent-Headed Mask, Source Conduit, Steve Nunes, Strawberry Chef, Rabbi Hina Miller, what's going on, brother? Joshua X, Logan Scott, and Eldor Crow. I want to welcome you guys and anybody else that gets here. Let me get that out of the way. All right, so what I wanted to do, you see the title. I had to wait a few days because I wanted all the spooky shit to come out, okay? Look, I don't know how many times I've been really promoting this, and I say promoting this for everybody's own personal benefit, probably since late 17 going into 18. In order to really take that next step and master yourself, you guys got to change some of these old paradigms, okay? You guys got to change these old narratives and these old concepts that you let kind of lay the foundation of your path out. I heard all the most ridiculousness. If it's not Mercury retrograde, if it's not Jupiter or Venus retrograde, if it's not this or that, it's the blood moon where people spook out, all right? I heard the most ridiculous shit, okay? So I want to address that, okay? I heard people say stuff like, oh, the blood moon, that's why I was so angry that day. That's why things were going so crazy and chaotic. And I'm listening. I've heard the religious folks say, I heard people tie it into the blood moon in the book of Joel. I've heard them tie it into the opening of the sixth seal in the book of Revelation. It sounds good, but unfortunately, it's just not fact. Guess what? There'll be many more blood moons after we're long and gone, okay? The blood moon, if you are governing your life based on astrological signs, planetary movements, and not working with the energy and mastering the energy as far as letting the energy dictate to you and control to you what you can and cannot do, then you'll never take it to the next level. As I said before, let me reiterate, my recommendation on using astrology, I'm not denying there's not spiritual influences and energy, but not to the point where you are at the mercy of its control. That's ridiculousness to me. That's not how a true occultist, left-hand path practitioner uses astrology and the planetary influences, be it the moon or any of the major planets, right? Because a real magician, occultist, practicing adept can practice magic successfully, any place, anytime, under any sign, under a waxing moon, a waning moon, a Mercury retrograde, a Jupiter influence, right? People say, oh, don't do any spiritual work under the influence of Jupiter because it's a chaotic energy. That's the best time to do spiritual work, contrary to belief. If you are a real chaos magician, if you're working with real primordial raw chaos, that would be foolishness not to. So let's go into the blood moon. Why did I title the video the blood moon, demonic feminine esoteric breakdown? Okay. Well, let's look at the basics of the blood moon, right? Because I heard some crazy shit over the last few days. People just spooking out, acting like, if it's not new age bullshit that people are coming with, it's religious bullshit. All right. So we're going to dispel the myths on all that. So what is a blood moon? Well, the blood moon, obviously the basics, we know it's when the earth, the sun, and the moon are in alignment with each other. What creates this reddish color or light or hue that the blood moon gives off? Well, based on the atmospheric reactions, the light from the sun and the positioning of the earth, sun, and moon, it gives off on the moon what appears to be that reddish color. As we know, the moon is non-luminous, right? Let's get that established, right? It receives its light from the sun, right? Which most people forget. There's an esoteric science to that. When you look at the masculine and feminine principles, right? We know that the lunar energies tie into the female, right? And we know lunar energies, they also say what's some of the things affiliated or the energies that most spiritualists will affiliate with a blood moon: chaos, transformational change, serious mental and spiritual shifts, and all that is true. But here's the difference of how you should absorb that and perceive it. Not to the point where you're at the mercy of it, because there is great mental shifts. It is a high time of chaos, right? But that is a positive thing for somebody that's a true occultist or left-hand path practitioner, right? So when we look at the blood moon, we look into the lunar cycle, right? And the reason why we have to connect the demonic female, or some would say in lesser mysteries, the divine female, it really ties in to the most potent cycle in this period or present moment of the menstrual cycle of the female, because the real blood moon is the female, which people keep forgetting, which happens for most women that are still getting the menstrual cycle, happens within that 29 to 30 day cycle period, right? So we have to look at that. When they took a lot of these breakdowns, they took stuff that happened internally, and then they tried to make it externalized, just like they've done with religions and spiritual systems and path. They took the inner spiritual mysteries, right, and then had to make it external for a form to simplify it and get people to connect, right? It's the same thing when we talk about when people talk about the primordial mothers and the divine females, right, and the divine goddesses and all that stuff, right? What they don't tell you, or what they should tell you, is that chaotic waters of Nun, or if we're talking about Tiamat, when we get into some of the breakdown of Sumerian and Babylonian information, it was describing, again, an internal process that took place inside the womb of the female, right? The chaotic waters of Nun and Nunet of ancient Egypt, right? we find that to be the story of when the semen or the sperm is released in the womb of the woman, and all those sperms race, and only a few make it as far as life being procreated. So it's the chaotic process that takes place within inside the female. Now, the menstrual cycle, or the blood cleansing, which that's what the blood moon is, right, is that cleansing or that menstruation for most women is supposed to create a regeneration, a renewal, and a recycle, right? So when we look at this and we parallel it to when this blood moon comes up every X amount of time in cycles and periods, whether you're calculating it according to certain calendars, people tend to externalize it and then they go spook it out, okay? They make it sound like it's some cataclysmic event, some crazy stuff that, oh, be careful, or don't do this, or, you know, just the most ridiculous nonsense, right? Where I don't see anybody talking about how they as a god or a goddess were able to tap into that chaotic energy and work spiritual magic. I don't hear nobody talking about that. Right? All I hear is beware of this, beware of that. Oh, it's such intense, this and that. And as I said before, some of that stuff is true. I'm not in denial of that stuff. But I do have a problem where people are at the mercy of it. They're at the control of it. And they've taken an inferior role to it. Right? That's not what it's for. So let's shift to two things here. The effect on that as far as male and female, right? We need to address that. Okay. Now, this is where you must, again, the difference of what I'm trying to explain is mastering and working with the energy and using it for beneficial outcome to get the results you want, not running from it in fear, not playing super cautious and beware of this or that, because no offense, but you might as well just go back to a previous religion that you came from. If you're, again, under the system of do's and don'ts and controls, and you can't do this and you should do this and don't do that, etc., you might as well just go back to that, right? So let's talk about first the effect or the power that the female has the ability to connect. It's a very high spiritual time, and this is when you should work rituals with gods, goddesses, demons, whatever titles you want to give them, that are connected to that chaotic energy. This would have been a great time to do work with Kali. This would have been a great time to do work with Sekhmet, with Tiamat. Now, I say this with caution, though. If you're gonna invoke that divine, demonic, feminine, chaotic energy, be prepared. Because, as I've said many times before, okay, which most people fail to recognize and realize, when you tap into the spiritual vibration of those archetypes, these feminine gods and goddesses, they are more aggressive. They are more masculine in nature than we would describe, male or masculinity on the physical realm. People have it twisted. They got it reversed. If you've really connected with Lilith, if you've really connected with Sekhmet, if you really have connected with Kali, if you really have connected with Naama, you know what I'm talking about. And this was a prime, or is a prime period to connect with that chaotic energy, especially, not limited to, but especially for the female practicing black magician or adept. Because the lunar energies are strong representation on this path to the female, because it represents all of those things that tie into chaos. The sun, right, is represented some of the divine masculine energies, but there is aspects and representations of the female with the sun, and I'll get into that, right? But both need each other. Now let's go back real quick to the blood moon and look at the esoterical breakdown. You have the earth, the sun, the male, the female, all in alignment, right? Now, it would also have been a good time for sex magic rituals with partners, right? Nobody talks about that. Why not? This would have been a heightened and one of the most powerful times to do some of that work. And I don't hear any chatter about that. Okay? So it would have been a great time, buddy. And I know some of you guys that are in the classes and that I'm working with on a personal level, it would have been a really great time to do shadow work. Now, some of you guys that are in the shadow work, we were in the midst of completing a Lucifer ritual, and we just are now on an assignment of a Kali ritual. Now, nobody asked me at that time in the class a few days before the blood moon. You think it was a coincidence that I put that together a few days before the blood moon? And I hope those that did it at or right around that time, because now there's reciprocating energies that don't just happen at the moment. They build up to the moment of the actual occurrence or eclipse, and they're lasting energies that linger for several days afterwards, which again, nobody talks about, right? So it is a heightened time, especially for the female, to work chaotic magic, hidden work, shadow work, uncovering the hidden self. A great time to remove blockages emotionally, mentally, physically. A great time to fix and repair psychological and mental and emotional trauma, right? Because that power, and most people who struggle, who may not be getting the results that they're looking for, and you hear this all the time, and I'm sure some of you listening who know people hear this all the time. They say, I'm struggling. I do ritual work all the time. I don't seem to be getting the results, this and that. You hear this all the time. And most of the time that's related to because they haven't unlocked the shadow or hidden self. And I talk about this a lot. Well, this blood moon and this chaos and these transformational changes and these mental and spiritual DNA shifts too. Now I want to go back real quick, and I'm going to show you something. Let's go back to how people take, I don't care if it's the blood moons, the new moons, the lunar solar eclipses. We could even go back to 2012, just to give you an understanding. Remember, it always starts from within on an esoteric or hidden level. And then you must be able to break down that mystery on an external level. So you must take it from the subjective conscious and now put it into practice in the objective conscious. And I'm going to show you something, okay? This is where people get a little lost and confused. We got to go back to another great spiritual apocalyptic event that people promoted for a few years. And I remember it started building up heavy in 2009 when people were talking about December 2012, right? Remember the hoopla with that, right? Look how many people ran with it and was spooked out because they didn't understand it. Saying again, dumb shit like, oh, I'm going to move. There's certain parts of Africa that won't be affected by the shift of the grid. I'm going to this place because I researched and I found out if you go to this place, I'm going to stockpile food and I'm going to go there and I'm going to survive until things get back to normal. This is the crazy shit that was going on. Let me say this, and I talked about this yesterday for those that were in my Patreon class, okay? If you live your life in fear of cataclysmic events, I don't care if it's World War III, you have all these other fools out here babbling on about, oh, the end of the world's coming, right? Because of the Ukraine-Russia war. Guess what? If we were sitting here right now and missiles were headed this way, just put your head between your legs and kiss your ass goodbye, okay? If you're not ready to make that transition, then you have stuff to worry about. You need to start doing work on yourself. Then you're not confident at where you are at the present moment. And if you fear that and you live your life worrying about shit like that, you got some serious work to do on the shadow and the hidden self. See, those who are really linked into this path and spiritual vibration, we don't live our lives in fears and conspiracy theories. And we keep abreast of what's going on in the world, but we don't live it to the point where we let that dictate and control us by fear, because all you can do is continue to live your life. And if something happens along the way, you just be prepared for it. But you don't stop doing what you're doing. I don't care what it was, COVID, war. And I told you guys going back on videos in 2017, there was a great things were going to start drastically changing on all levels. I told you they were getting ready to do some crazy stuff. Changing the economy. I was speaking heavy on that. And as we know, not to get into that COVID shit, because I don't want to waste my time and energy on it and give it life, but we know that was a great economic shift, an economic reset. We see that happening now with the supply chain, but what's going on in the economy, what they're trying to do with the currency, right? That's a whole nother story for another class, and I've done videos on that, right? I told you a lot of this had to deal with population control, right? Because as I said, when that first hit, a lot of elderly people were taken out because there was a strain on the healthcare system. There wasn't money there to take care of all these people. You just need to be educated, and as you move forward, doesn't stop you doing from what you should be doing. But there's some people who live their lives based on these conspiracy theories. So back to 2012, when they were promoting that heavy in 2009, and for those that may have been around, and maybe you're one of them, and you were around me at the time, from the very first day, going 3 years prior to that, I tried to tell everybody, and I've repeated it multiple times in classes. I wasn't on YouTube at the time. This stuff didn't even exist to me at the time. And I would tell people, if you go back to the Dresden Codex of the Mayans, this is not a literal event. It's a spiritual shift in people's DNA and mental intellect. It's a great spiritual shift. It has nothing to do with, oh, this is going to happen and that's going to happen and all these cataclysmic events were going to happen on that day, right? I try to tell people, when you're seeing the shift and the weather changes in nature, that's a gradual buildup process. And it's going to get worse until 2030. Yes. Is there weather shifts? Is the planet changing? Yes, because the planet is going through its cycle. It goes through roughly every 24,896 years, roughly 25,000 years, which is an equinox. Two of those, roughly 50,000 years, makes up an epoch. And if you understand your history and cycles in nature, when you approach an epoch, which we are at that approachment, you see great changes on all levels in nature, in whether you correlate that to the weather, and also spiritually within individuals. This is why people going out of their fucking mind. This is why people just go into places and can't take it anymore and just start randomly shooting people, right? This other crazy bastard that just did what he did in Buffalo, now they want to use the excuse that COVID radicalized him. No, the motherfucker was crazy before that. It just came out because people will be tested. See, as I said before, what COVID made people realize, people who are not grounded in themselves, all the ones that were saying, I don't know what to do. I'm so bored. I'm going crazy. I'm stuck in the house. I've watched everything on Netflix, all that shit. These are your crazy people because they have nothing else going on outside of that, right? These are people who don't read. They don't study. They don't do anything. They have no hobbies. They have nothing that keeps their interest. These are your people who have no fucking creativity because all they want to do all day is go out to clubs and hang out and watch movies. So they didn't know what the fuck to do with themselves. They were going batshit crazy, jammed up in the house. I used to hear stuff like, I watched everything on Netflix. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. Oh, that's pathetic. I don't know what to tell you. I know I had plenty of time to do some stuff I didn't want to do. Or I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. I had plenty of time to do stuff I didn't have time to get to. So it always was in reference, these cataclysmic events was always in reference to great shifts in spiritual consciousness. So that's what 2012 represented. Yes, did the Earth's poles, magnetic poles, shift? Yes, because see, where people were getting thrown off, because when you go back to, say, Atlantis, right? Or you go back to Pangea, or you go back to the continental drift, right? They know in history that sometimes if those poles shift too much to one side, things that were beneath water level rise up and things that weren't go down. Is that shift gradually, slowly happen? Yes, these are cycles. These are nature. It will happen again, right? But it's never happening the way people describe it because they run with it. This is a gradual process that builds up over X amount of time. People think it's going to happen in a blink of an eye. Like you're going to walk outside, boom, snap your fingers. It all happens in the blink of an eye. That's not how this works. All right. Because you know, as well as I know, there were tons of people at that time leading up to 2012 that was spooky than a motherfucker. Okay. That were batshit crazy. Okay. And then you didn't see any of them when December came and gone. Then there's the other people that came with the narrative. Well, we're not that, the Gregorian calendar is not correct. So 2012 hasn't come yet. And that is correct. You are right. Because that was the other mistake. People were correlating it to the Gregorian calendar. What's the Gregorian calendar based on? It's called the Gregorian calendar because Pope Gregory the Great came up with the calendar we use here in America. And we know it doesn't mathematically add up because when you look at the breakdown, the months have uneven days every 4 years. In the month of February, they add an extra day. Which, where do you get that from? How do you do that? That's because they trap you under this illusion of linear time. And I've talked about that many times on and off over the years. There's no such thing. Time is just existence. It is. It expands and contracts out into the multiverses. There's no beginning, there's no end. You must understand that. right? Everything is in cycles. And I always try to give the example. If you take a rock and you throw it into a lake or a pond, where that rock hits at the center, it ripples out and expands the waves from the effect of where that rock hits. That, in essence, is how time expands and contracts. They know this, but they tried to trap you by keeping you in the box of this false linear time with a beginning and an end. Because if I can keep you in that beginning and end mind state, I can create fear. Well, this was the beginning, and if you weren't there for the beginning, this is how it so-called happened in the beginning. God created this and that, and they do it through religion, take you up to the present day, and then have fear and panic down the road to this end point, the future. But don't worry, if you get in line, you'll be okay. You'll get that pass. You'll get that free pie in the sky. So breaking the illusion of time is important, of dispelling the myths and these old narratives. So yes, the calendar, people that came with that response were correct. The calendar people were basing 2012 on was completely wrong and inaccurate. How do you know that? Well, the 2012 prophecy comes from the Mayans, right? And if you go into the Dresden Codex, right, you have to go in there and you have to look. And when you do, it takes a little time. If you're patient, do the breakdown with how they came up with that year and the cycles and the time frame, and then do your mathematical equation, and you'll see it was nowhere near where people were claiming it. See, this is why I keep telling people to be proactive and not reactive. See, when you're a reactionary being, you can be sold anything. So just like people came on the internet the last week or so and were hooting and hollering about the blood moon and spooking it out, oh, don't do this. Like I heard people say, oh, now I understand why I was so mad and angry. Man, get the fuck out of here with that nonsense. Okay? It ain't got nothing to do with that. If you believe that, you are a weak individual. And you have a lot of learning to do. No master, no god, no goddess accepts that ideology and embraces it. As I said before, a magician can do magic any place, any time, under any spiritual sign, under any waxing or waning moon, or any planetary influence. If you don't have that ability, then you still are a servant. Okay? Understand what the energies represent. Again, I want to reiterate, I'm not saying there's not energy effects from it. There is. But what is your job as a magician? Excuse me if I cough, my mouth's very dry. What is the duty and job of a practicing magician? I talk about this all the time, right? It's your job to master and manipulate those energies to work in your beneficial favor. This is why when we go into the science, for an example, I don't teach people, and I'm not, if you do it, that's your choice. I'm not saying you can't. I don't teach people banishing rituals, right? I get contacted with that all the time. Well, the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, or what banishing rituals do you recommend? And my answer is none. Because no good magician, we're not trying to destroy. First of all, let me back up. You can't destroy energy. How do you banish and destroy energy? Right? You manipulate it. You change it. Right? You might create in your mind the illusion that you're destroying it. Because if first of all, scientifically, you'd have to break down to me how you destroy energy and how is it completely annihilated and eliminated. That's why I say when people talk about shadow work and devouring the weaker aspects of yourself, I always follow up with one thing. What are you replacing it with? And I say that because of what I just said, right? Energy can be destroyed. It can be manipulated, changed, altered, right? That's a scientific fact. If I'm wrong, somebody present to me how it is destroyed and give me the science. How do you destroy protons, electrons, atoms, quarks, byads, zeals? This is the very fabric of existence, the glue, the tachyon frequencies that keep things binded in the universe and multiverses, right? How do you destroy that? Because remember, they fucked up years ago when they said the smallest particles at one point, and I'm probably going back maybe 50 to 100 years ago, they thought, and maybe a little longer, I might be wrong on that, they thought for years that atoms was the smallest particles, right? Then they realized they were wrong. Then they said, no, atoms break down into quarks. Then they said, no, quarks break down into byads. No, byads break down into zeals. And then they realized this shit is never ending. That's what I mean when you guys say you go into the void, the abyss. There's no parameters. There's no beginning. There's no end. Stop trying to put a time frame on them. Okay? This is where people get fucked up. They get confused. There is no beginning. There is no end. There's just existence. And I don't want to sound like mumbo jumbo gibberish or sound like some spiritual person just gibbering off babble. You must come to the realization of that. Your very existence at this present moment is a cycle in time. That's it. I know you want it to sound more vainglorious than that, but it is what it is, right? So being under that illusion or false concept of linear time creates confusion, right? So, and to finish off with 2012, and then I'll move on and get back to the blood moon and the female, but this is all connected. As you know, I'll be jumping around because all these great cataclysmic events in nature, lunar, planetary events, people run with it and they spook out. So here's the question I would pose to people. As I said, 2012, nothing happened on the level that anybody talked about even the years prior, a couple of years prior to leading up to it. You know it's bullshit when, what was it? I think that year, the year before, they literally made a movie called 2012. And you saw that Hollywood boy. Once they get their hands on it, listen, I told you, if something's really getting ready to go down, when you see them motherfuckers getting on the space shuttle and ships and shuttling their ass out of here, that's when you know something really get ready to go down. If they ain't going nowhere, ain't shit getting ready to happen. Not on that level to the point where they can't control it. Okay? That's what you always got to keep in mind. Again, it's about being proactive, not reactive. But unfortunately, we have a lot of people who just react to every little conspiracy that's put out on the news, on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, and they all run to it. Oh my God. And I get emails. It's the funniest thing. And I still don't know why over the years people have not learned I don't give a shit, because it doesn't change anything I got to do, right? If it affects you that much to the point where it disrupts your life and it's changing everything you're doing at the moment, then that's a problem. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, contrary to what you may think or what others are telling you. So back to the blood moon and the divine female, then we'll shift to the male, right? It's a great heightened time. The actual literal blood moon is the menstrual cycle of the female that takes place on a monthly basis that's in alignment with the lunar cycles. And a female that is vibrating at its proper frequency, a woman who's really in tune with her spirituality, right, has higher heightened senses of power. We might call it women's intuition and all those other titles we give it. But the woman can regenerate and recleanse the man, okay? I'm not going to get into too much detail how that's done because that's a topic for another time. But this is why in alignment, people always talk about disruptive relationships. As I said many times before, you don't have to identically be on have the same spiritual ideologies, because that's probably going to be next to impossible. But there has to be some common ground there. Because when that frequency is out of alignment between both poles, male and female, or masculine and feminine, it creates conflict, right? So those, especially females who still have that menstrual cycle, that's your regeneration. The female is the internal aspect, right? As I went back to the chaotic waters of noon, males are external, right? So we need to be cleansed by the divine female or feminine energy, right? This is basically, this event describes something that was one of the hidden mysteries in a lot of the esoterical spiritual systems. But again, religion, lesser systems, and spiritual schools of thought took it and externalized it, and then people ran with it, like they always do, all right? And they spooked the fuck out, right? So now, let's shift to the man real quick. The approach of the male, okay? The aspects of how they could have connected with this blood moon, minus all the spookiness. Same thing with the male. The male is not restricted to, oh, don't do any work. It's a serious time of chaos. Of course it is. And that's the best thing, right? What is chaos, right? What is primordial chaos, right? The word primordial has root in the word prime, original. When you're saying primordial chaos, you're saying the foundation. You're saying the root, right? So when they talk about the primordial mothers, when they talk about the chaotic waters of noon, they're talking about the origin of the prime substance that all things manifest from via that chaotic darkness, right? This is what we're talking about. So when you hear the word chaos, there's two ways you could look at that. There's the surface breakdown, because on the surface level, prior to being in the occult or any of these spiritual paths, we just learn in basic educational systems of indoctrination, chaos is something negative, right? It means disorder, right? Confusion. And they're right to an extent. It's only confusion and disorder to those who can't make order out of it. Because in order to have order, right, there has to be chaos. In order for there to be light, there had to be what? Darkness. In order to have something, right, you must have what first? Nothing or no thing or nothingness, right? There's a play on those words. And then something, and some can mean two things, the word S-O-M-E or the mathematical word sum, the sum of a thing. In order to have the sum of a thing, S-U-M, sum of a thing, you must have nothing first. And that nothingness represents that void, that abyss, that chaos. Everything emerged from that first, even religious people's biblical God. Because when you read the first couple of verses in Genesis, he admits to it. In the beginning, right? God created the heavens and the earth. And his spirit hovered above the void and the deep. And first of all, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday in the Esoteric or Occult Bible study class. First of all, who's narrating that story? That's all I want to know. Did you ever ask yourself why the Bible's in a third-party narrative? Nobody ever questions that. Who's speaking? Who's telling the story? Even if these are revelations revealed to so-called prophets, who's telling the story here? Who's getting the revelation? Okay? Because it's being spoken by somebody in a third party. And who is viewing this is what I want to know. We know it's men that wrote this shit and made it up, but I'm just saying this is some key points to point out to somebody who literally believes these literal stories. But the key thing in there is, in the first couple of verses, he says, let there be light. A few verses down, which is confirmation that he existed in darkness prior to before there was light. So what is darkness? Is darkness really a bad thing? We talked about this yesterday for those that are on the Patreon classes. Is this thing darkness, evil, as most people describe it, religious and non-religious? Oh, darkness is evil. Stay away from darkness. It's evil, right? I find it very funny for religious people to say that their God existed in darkness. Can't be that evil. If you believe that this is the beginning, if that's what you believe, that's another thing that's nonsense. But if you believe that this is the beginning, prior to that beginning that you accept as fact in Genesis, you also would have to accept the fact this being that you call God was existing in darkness. And then the question is, for how long and why? Okay. And what is this really talking about? Right? These are questions most people don't want to ask themselves. Because then the other question comes up. If this is the beginning, right? And gets a lot of religious people mad, especially pastors and priests. Who created God? Oh, that's like the pink elephant in the room. Don't ask that to a religious person in a religious environment. Because then they're going to get super spooky with you. Oh, no, God just is. See, you don't understand. There's some things that are mysteries or whatever. No, just say you don't know. Okay? Let's not make things up. Okay? Let's just say you don't know. It's easier that way. And it's up to us to demystify this stuff through our spiritual work. I said to get the answers to a lot of these things. And you wouldn't be absorbing all these spooky narratives like the blood moon and this and that, if you were really doing the ritual work you're supposed to be doing. And I'm not being judgmental because nobody is perfect. That's not what I'm saying. But I got to call it for what it is. To get the answers to this thing, you must do ritual work where you are vibrating outside of person, place, and thing, three-dimensional existence, whether that's through transcendental meditation, astral travel, ritual work, dream work. All of those are aspects of vibrating outside of person, place, and thing. When your vibrational spiritual frequency is sped up and you have an OBE, out-of-body experience, you leave the physical, right? The soul is energy. It's never destroyed, right? That's what the ancient Egyptians meant by eternal life. Two things. By passing things down from genealogy to genealogy through the ancient hidden mysteries of ancient Egypt, but also they understood that, whether you break it down as the Ka, the Ba, the Ib, they knew that the Ka and the Ba, the spirit and the soul, especially the soul, it lived on forever. It never died. And they knew that there was a whole nother process you went through as you transition from the physical to the spiritual. You never die spiritually. Physically, yes. Do you give up the essence physically? Yes. But you've been here many times before. That's nothing new. As I said, cycles. Now, I want to get into reincarnation because that opens a whole nother door, right? Because reincarnation is a very debatable topic, right? I think one has to come to the realization of that through their work. Yes, there's theories out there, there's books, there's information, but there's not really 100% concrete, inconclusive evidence. You've got to come to that understanding. Me personally, through my work, and it's personal and it's subjective, that's a reality to me. I know for a fact, a lot of us, including myself, it's not our first go around here. Okay. But that's again, a topic that's open for discussion on a multitude of levels. It just depends on where you're at in your spiritual practice and your journey and your perspective on it, right? And your outlook on it. That has a lot to do with it. But we have to take into account, back to the male, right? He too has the ability, just like the female, to tap into this pure, primordial, chaotic energy. Again, for both, it's a great time to do work with any of these archetypes, especially Set, right? Let's talk about Set, for example. He's referred to as the god of chaos and confusion. Why? To the outside of his, they go, why would you want to work with somebody that represents chaos and confusion? I don't get it. He's not called the god of chaos and confusion because he creates the chaos and confusion. He brings it to the surface so he can show the practicing magician or adept how to make order out of the chaos. That's why he's called the god of chaos and confusion, because he shows the initiate or the adept how to make order out of the chaos you might be struggling with in your life on a mental level, a spiritual level, an emotional level, financial level, and yes, a physical level, right? I call this the 5 points of mastery of the pentagram, especially the pentagram of Set. And some of you have done the Baphomet ritual, pentagram ritual, and you know what it represents. It represents that harmonization inside the black adept, male or female. 5 points of self-mastery, right? When you look at that pentagram, and there's more that goes into it, but Set represents all of those things, right? See, when we hear those attributes sometimes that are affiliated with some of these archetypes or these gods or goddesses, some people get thrown off, right? Same thing with Kali, right? On the surface, I'm not talking to some of us who per se are more experienced and have, more knowledge under our belt. I'm talking about for maybe those who are newer, raw, and don't really understand it, right? Because you could look at the image of Kali and go, man, that's a very morbid, negative thing to look at. Because it represents death. It represents destruction. But it represents death and destruction and deconstruction in order for the individual to reconstruct themselves and make themselves anew. Why I say Kali is one of the great archetypes to work with during the blood moon, especially when you look at the representation of the image of Kali that most people are familiar with her foot on the chest of Shiva. What does that represent? And she's holding the scimitar knife, right? Or I'm sorry, the pegibet, the knife of separation. And she's got the bloody head in one hand, and she's got bloody skulls around her neck. And she, as the female, has the foot on the chest of Shiva. What does that represent? Why Shiva? We know Shiva, right? He's a very volatile, powerful male aspect or archetype in the Hindu pantheon, right? He represents destruction too, but not all gloom and doom destruction, because he is a raw power. He also represents that destruction, so regeneration or reconstruction and renewal can take place, so the individual can manifest and become who they truly are, God or goddess, destined to become what they can become, right? So why Shiva and Kali in that pantheon? And why the representation of the blood and the cutting away, right? And why the foot of the divine demonic female on the chest of the male? Where is the foot at? Where it's located on the chest? What chakra is located there? The heart chakra, with the root seat of the emotions of the man, which can only be harmonized by the divine demonic feminine energy of the female. There's more science that goes into that. We see these images on a regular basis, and we don't really look into it the way we're supposed to look into it. So when you're working with that aspect or image of Kali, now we get into Kali Durga, which is another aspect. But when you work on that aspect or image of Kali, that's what icons or images, statues are supposed to do. They're supposed to unlock aspects of this consciousness in your psyche. We don't set up altars and put statues on them because it's just a trendy occult thing to do, and it looks nice and it looks very occultic. There's a deeper science to it. As I told you, myself and others, and I'm sure many of you listening, this would be a geometrical setup to your altar. Things are positioned for a particular reason. They face a certain way. Your altar is set up and lined up in a particular sequence for a particular way, and it's very personal. You know, for me and for most, yeah, you can just throw stuff on there. And if that's the way you'd like to do it and you embrace that form of chaos, maybe that works for you. But it's a representation of making order out of chaos, right? And that's why I will place Set at one of the forefronts, right? Because in the center, I have Set sitting on his throne, and I have an elevated black flame or candle above him in the center of the altar. What does that represent? It represents the black flame, or what we call the black flame of consciousness, or the black flame of Set. All that knowledge that is obtained in the void, the abyss, or the primordial chaotic darkness. And it also represents that one has to go into the darkness to do the work of the light or to gain the intellect. It all starts there. You can't avoid that concept regardless of what your personal belief is. Okay? It's unavoidable. You can't dance around it. It don't matter what you call yourself on a spiritual level. You would have to factually admit it's not the reverse the way they've been showing us for years through religion and how we're indoctrinated from young children to the present day. For those that are not, quote unquote, conscious and aware. And I hate to use that word, but you know what I'm talking about. So we have to dispel all these myths. So the man has the same ability and power to tap into the transforming energies of the blood moon. So the point I'm trying to get at as a whole is it's about understanding what these energies represent and how we can master and manipulate them for our beneficial purpose, personal, whatever outcome in our ritual work or what we're trying to accomplish. That's what a real magician or practicing black magic adept does. We don't look at it like, oh my God, can't do this and this. Oh, don't do this in Mercury retrograde. Don't do this during the blood. No, that's spookiness. Okay. And I've found out the experience, and not just myself, I've talked to many others over the years who will agree I found that all the things, for the most part, that people have told you don't do when it comes to astrology and spiritual work, I found they've been completely dead ass wrong. And as I said earlier, one of the big ones I used to always hear years ago, going back to the early 90s, I remember it was at a time, especially with candle magic, they'll say stuff like, you shouldn't do any work when the moon is waning in Jupiter. And, dark blue, the color dark blue, not light blue, does carry more darker type of energies. I get that, right? But I said to myself, wait a minute. Why would we not do it? Say, because it represents a lot of chaotic energy. Well, yes, to somebody who may not be working the occult or the left-hand path, that would be the religious understanding of it. I get that, right? But if we're supposed to be occultists, practicing magicians, dark sorcerers, whatever terms, I'm just throwing titles out there that people are familiar with. It really doesn't mean anything, but something that people can grasp onto. Wouldn't we want to tap into that? So I want to go back to the banishing thing. Why I said earlier, I don't try to encourage or teach anybody to do stuff like the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. And I'll tell you why. If you haven't heard me talk about it before, let me throw it out there again. Very simple. Question I ask is, what are you banishing? Right? And then people say stuff like, well, the negative energy, the bad spirits and the bad forces, the negative energy, the bad spirits and the bad forces. And that leads me to my next question. Describe to me what these bad spirits are, bad energies, and bad forces. Now, these are people who claim to be occultists, left-hand path practitioners. This confuses me. Well, like demons and don't we work with demons? What are we trying? What are we doing here? No, I'm saying and then it just goes from one thing to the next. And I'm doing that in that process to go to show them how ridiculous it is. So here's the bottom line. You'll find there's other systems or other rites, such as in working Egyptian Heka, casting the Hermetic Circle. In draconian magic, there's a formal draconian opening where you go to the cardinal points and the points in between. But I'm going to use the example of the Hermetic Circle that people might be familiar with, right? Casting the Hermetic Circle and invoking the triad of light and darkness. So let's look at this. And what's the difference between that and banishing? First of all, the reason why I don't recommend banishing, especially things like the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, it's very religious in nature because you're invoking religious, Hebrew mysticism, Raphael and Gabriel and all that. And if that's your thing, that's your thing. Cool. That's not the route I go, because what it does, it ties you back into religion. I'm not saying you can't study that. I'm not saying you can't study the Kaaba and the Kabbalistic mysteries, but that too is just a higher form of religion, right? It just goes on a deeper level, but it still combines you to what we call the external mysteries, right? It's not an esoterical understanding. It's the same thing when you look at the tree of life, the Kabbalistic tree, and the tree of death, the Qliphoth, right? It's the antithesis. It's the other side, right? And when you look at it from that perspective, it takes on a whole different meaning, because the Qliphoth is taking you into the void, the deep void and abyss of your subconscious mind, your subjective consciousness, your subjective realm, your subjective universes or multiverses. It takes you into the realm of unlimited possibilities where there is no parameters, no beginning, no ends, right? Some people don't want to go there because they're not comfortable, so they stay in conformity with beginning and end, life, death, heaven and hell, God, devil, man in between. That's all those paradigms of control. You're doing the same shit when you're letting them dictate to you, oh my God, it's Jupiter and Mercury retrograde and the blood moon. They've already subconsciously stamped in your mind the do and the don'ts. And you think you're coming off with something heavy, breaking it, the blood moon is this and blah, blah, blah. But then you come with that conformity bullshit right after it. Oh, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. You're not supposed to do this. And you can do this. Nonsense. Foolishness. You can do whatever you want. That's entirely up to you, as long as you understand what you're doing, right? So let me add that to it. Very important. Is everybody skilled in that way to do it? Absolutely not. Does everybody have the power and the ability to get there? If you're not there, most definitely so. And the time is now. The only way you're going to be able to vibrate outside these existing narratives and paradigms is you must release them and let them go. Nothing will change if you still want to play Santeria, and you still want to play Ifa, and you still want to play Comedic Master, and you still want to play Kabbalah mysticism, and you still want to play working with the seals of Solomon from a religious perspective. All of these narratives, and I told you, most of that stuff and information comes from people who are religious and weren't really occult practitioners, especially when you look at a lot of the books that first came out going back years ago on, say, working with the Goetia and the seals of Solomon. A lot of those books were written by Christians. Only in the last 20 years or so did a lot more foundational books by occult practitioners start coming out. So it's very important you understand what you're reading and who wrote it, because a lot of those people back in the day were people who were Christians and religious that were just interested and fascinated with demonology, right? And this is why you see a lot of religious and Christian overtones. I don't fuck with none of that stuff. Okay, why? Because one thing that came to light or intellect, when I say light, is the realization until you shed all those things and start creating your own path, nothing will ever change for you. You will still be a slave to indoctrination on a multitude of levels. And that's the problem that I've been seeing since 2017. As we've seen in these last several years, 5 or 6 years or so, the occult is now becoming very popular, more so than it used to be. In some circles, it's becoming very mainstream and commercial. And people are mixing in fluffy new age bullshit and Ifa shit and traditional systems in with it. And it's coming off in a very corrupt aspect or methodology. And it's creating a lot of confusion in a lot of people. And I see it because I deal with these people. You know how many people have come to me who did readings with other quote unquote spiritualists and the crazy shit that they're told? I mean, I could be here all day talking about it. For those that know that work with me, I show you how you do it for yourself. See, that's the difference. See, I'm like I'm toxic to those people because those people want you to come to them. They want to do a reading for you, and then they want to come back door and hit you over the head. Oh, well, you got to do this work and that work. And then they come with a ridiculous large amount of money that's required to do that. See, I don't do that shit. See, I do a reading and I work with you, and the only thing I get compensated for is my time. I'm going to show you how you can do it for yourself. See, nobody wants that because that takes a lot of money out of people's pockets. And then there's some people who are a slave to readings, right? I can't tell you how many times, and hey, I got people who come to me for back-to-back readings and didn't even do the work that they're supposed to do that comes up in the reading. And then they wonder why shit's going haywire in their life. You keep doing these readings, you keep getting this information from the spirits that this work needs to be done. And I'm explaining it to you, showing you how you need to do it for yourself. And then you come back on the flip end a couple of weeks later. I need another reading. Okay. If you say so. And then more shit comes up. More shit on top of more shit. And now you got a big bag of shit that you're not dealing with. Okay? The point being is it all always has been and always will be centered around what you do and what you don't do. Say that again. It's all centered around what you do and you don't do. Because this is 99.9% of the answer why things are going. You're getting results and things are going right, or you're not getting results. Because again, it's based on what you're doing and not doing. Okay? That's all karma is. It's cause and effect. I've said this for years. And what's the cause and effect? The choices and the decisions you make. Nobody's sitting around, somebody's putting a hex on me, curse on me. Well, the fact that you believe that in your mind, then it's effective because you are giving power to it. Nobody else. You get that all the time. You always hear people who think some external shit's being done to them. And when you really dig deep and investigate and probe, you'll find out it's the person. They're delusional in their mind. They're not sound in their mind. And how many times have I said you must be in a sound mind and a sound body to master this path? Right? I said this, I think, a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to say it again. I don't know if it was on YouTube or maybe it was in the Patreon class, but I'm going to say it here. If I didn't, People always bring up this term in different religions and spiritual systems. How do you lose your soul? We hear this term right over the years. Oh man, that person's crazy. They lost their soul. Religious people say that a lot. They lost their soul. And I asked myself, how does one literally lose their soul? That's the question. How do you lose your soul? But I got an even better follow-up question. If you do lose your soul, can you get it back? And how? So let's explore this real quick. The true occultist comes to the understanding there's more of a scientific explanation to that. It's not just a blanket statement or a vague statement, okay? When I was just talking about sound mind and sound body, there's an old occult saying that goes back actually into metaphysics. And the saying goes, mind, like if you mine a cave that has gold, you're digging deep, right? Mind your mind for the jewels of your soul, right? Mind your mind for the jewels of your soul. If you lose your mind, you lose your soul. It's that simple. It's saying mind your mind for the jewels of your soul, because to unlock the hidden mysteries and knowledge that you've been seeking digs deep, and it exists in those deep aspects of your subconscious mind. So if you're not in sound mind, what can happen to you, right? You can have nervous breakdown, mental disorders, stress, high levels of stress, anxiety, and which can lead to a whole bunch of other problems, correct? This is how one can lose their soul. How can they gain it back? By reversing that process through correct information, understanding, applying right information or knowledge, and put it into practice so they can get the results and the desired outcome they're trying to achieve. So that's all that word, that's all that concept means. So they know if they can control your mind, which they've been doing for years through media, through movies, and now through obviously the internet and social media, right? And various other systems of indoctrination, they know that they captured your soul. They can control how you think, how you act, what you eat, how you dress, places you frequent and visit, how you behave and react towards others. It's that deep. The programming is that deep. For one to master themselves on this path, they must deprogram all those aspects of themselves. What have I been saying for years? You must be a critical thinker, right? You must do a serious analyzation of self. You must be proactive and not reactive. And it's tough because the emotions can be a tough thing. Anger can be a tough thing. Reacting off a raw emotion can be a tough thing. And we learn lessons from it. And nobody is perfect. But you must get it under control, right? We're to the point where it is not consuming you or devouring you, right? That's the point, okay? That's the understanding one must come to the realization of. And if you don't have that understanding, how can you master self? Because what have I always said for years? This is a path of what? Self-mastery. So why are we looking everywhere else for the solutions, but we're not looking for it within inside of ourselves? And then people get this all the time. I'm gonna have to address this because this shit always comes up. I get confused with that concept of everything comes from within, and the first hermetic principle of mentalism. All is mental. Mental is all. The universe is mental. I'm confused because I have these external experiences in my rituals. Yeah, you do. I've said this before. Then how is everything mental and internal? Because I said I've always real simple. Where does it start? I say, what do you mean? I say, give me an example when you did a ritual. I've had people tell me I did an ancestral ritual, and in that ritual, I saw my grandmother. It's wonderful, beautiful. I did a ritual with Sekhmet or Set or Lucifer, and Lucifer personified in front of me, and I saw him, and this happened. So they're describing this visual experience they're having. I said, okay. So I said, now let me ask you a question. Whether it's any of the aforementioned archetypes, what do they look like? They give me a description. Oh, it looked like this and it looked like that, and she or he looked like this. I say, okay. I said, let me ask you another question. Where do you think the origin of that image came from? I said, well, I've seen it before. I said, oh, you've seen it before. Or even if they haven't seen it before, I say, is that the first time you saw it? I say, yeah. I said, so let me ask you a question. Before you even started looking at books on Lucifer or Kali or seeing images of artwork and illustrations, etc., I said, would you have been able to manifest that image or likeness of the deity? They would say, I don't know. I'm not sure. They don't understand that everything that we absorb, books you read, images that you gaze upon, things that you take into your subconscious are stored there. Because I guarantee you, every single person that has a visual experience of a deity I'm talking about, right, saw that description, or that description was built and shaped in their subconscious mind based on what they absorbed over the years, right? Because let me ask you this. If somebody, per se, came on this path at a certain age in life and then they started working with Lucifer, and prior to doing that, they didn't really know anything about Lucifer on that level, didn't do any work, but then all of a sudden they come on the path, they start reading stuff about Lucifer, they start seeing images and illustrations and artwork, and then all of a sudden they start having experiences. So my question is, why were you not having those experiences prior? Why? Because you didn't unlock that energy or awareness in the psyche of your subconscious mind. That's why. So it still applies to that first principle. All is mental. Mental is all. The universe is mental. Because even though there is some type or level of external experience via just described, but it doesn't change the fact it still has its point of origin in the subconscious mind. You can't get around that. So that's what it means when it says all things are mental. Because you had to go into your subjective consciousness to manifest that. What do you do in meditation? What do you do in ritual? How do you do that? When you're invoking or you go into a transcendental or possession state in ritualistic work, when you're vibrating at a high frequency, what do you think is taking place there? Right? And how do you think that takes place? You must go into your subjective conscious to activate and do that. You can't just do it in the objective consciousness, right? Or your mundane consciousness, right? Because you can't access that power there. You can't access that energy there, right? You have to go to that level. So it doesn't negate what that principle represents on the first one of those 7 hermetic principles, right? So it still is in line with all is mental, mental is all, the universe is mental. It doesn't change that, okay? Now, you can have your own perception on it. You don't have to agree with it. That's personal. But I would still challenge the person to explain. Because I hear all these people, even people who aren't on the occult, that are into some form of spirituality. Oh, I had a vision and I saw this, or Buddha came to me, or whether it's a religious person, I saw this. All right, even go back, and I've talked about this before. Have you ever read or hear stories over the years of apparitions of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Catholicism, right? We've all got to be familiar with this to a degree. We've seen over the years where there's been, quote unquote, so-called sightings or visions, whether it be Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico, Our Lady of Lourdes in France, and all these other places. One thing, there's a pattern that's consistent in those apparitions or visions, right? They all have, she was in this white and blue robe, and she had this veil on, and they all give pretty much a similar description or aspect. And the question that I pose is, why do you think that is? If you pause for a minute, the answer is real simple. Because there's a worldwide propagation of that image that we see of Mary. Regardless, there might be slight variances, but it's the same image. If you constantly are stamping that in somebody's mind repetitively, and we know the subconscious mind is programmed through repetition, and that could be a good or a bad thing. Do you think it's a coincidence that all these people are having similar descriptions? Or is it they've been programmed with that from a very early age? Okay. Whether those who witnessed it were quote unquote devoted Catholics or Christians, they still have been exposed to it to a certain level or degree. It's no different with every aspect of things you experience overall across the board in life, right? When you're exposed to repetition, it could be, let's just say you're not familiar with a sport, and you start watching a sport consistently day in and day out, week in and week out on TV. At some point, you're going to get very familiar, not only with just the rules and the regulations of the sport, with the players, the team names, the uniforms, the colors, right? Okay? That's due to repetition. It's no different when you could be sitting on your couch late at night and a commercial for food gets up, because they know through symbols and signs they can program what affects you and think. And all of a sudden you could see a commercial for McDonald's or some type of dessert and you get a craving now. Oh, man, I'm craving that now. Are you really? Like I said, symbols are very powerful and important because big companies or corporations like McDonald's have a very simple but powerful symbol to show you how symbols or sigils communicate consciousness to your subconscious mind. Real simple. When you think of McDonald's, what's the first thing you see? The golden arches. And be honest with yourself. When you look at the golden arches, thoughts of hamburgers and cheeseburgers and French fries and shakes come to your mind. Whether you eat it or you don't, that's irrelevant. I'm just going to show you how powerful symbols are. You could take that with any restaurant, right? Most of their symbols are going to activate right out the gate the awareness of the products they sell, right? Why do you think companies hire marketing firms and pay them millions of dollars to come up with labels and symbols and logos? Because they know a good logo or symbol is a very powerful tool, right? We could take it, look at Coke, right? We're very familiar with the Coke logo, the Pepsi Cola logo, right? We could go through a bunch of them. Immediately when we see it, to the point, you could start, for an example, Coke, you could look at the can, right? The can is red, right? Red, we know red, just like with the blood moon, it invokes passion, the color red, right? Very powerful energy to it. They're very selective when they choose colors and symbols and how they write things out, right? So there's a reasoning behind all of these things. So if those things can be projected to our consciousness, what makes you think by you looking upon images and the likeness of things doesn't program through repetition how you view it and experience it, right? They've done this for years with religion, right? Because the Sistine Chapel and artists like Michelangelo and Machiavelli and any of these artists that painted religious paintings, right? They established for thousands of years their interpretation of the image and likeness of these so-called biblical people and prophets, right? You know, that long-haired European image of Jesus, you know, doing this shit, you know, right? And through repetition and over time of constantly stamping that in your head, I don't even care if you've negated all that and put it aside and don't deal with it. I guarantee you, if you hear that word Jesus, it still comes up in your mind. Okay, you can front, you can pretend, no, because I have people bullshit in front, no, because they're so woke and conscious. I can just say a word and an image will come to mind. If I say Israel and the Jews, you're going to think of the black people in the hats at the Wailing Walls, and they're not really the real Jews or the real Hebrews, right? I could throw a bunch of words out there. If I say Muslims, they program you now to think Arabs, terrorists, right out the gate. Right? And that's not true. Not every Arab or Muslim is a terrorist. But unfortunately, through programming and indoctrination and repetition, your mind thinks like that. Okay? You could pretend like it don't, but it does. And they know through symbols, through colors, through media, through frequencies, through vibrations, they can control the way you think. And they can do it through the blood moon too. Okay? And people get sucked in all the time. Like I told you in the beginning of this video, I was laughing my ass off at all the ridiculous shit. I went on to various different YouTube videos and read the comments, and I was laughing my ass off. I said, man, silly rabbits. Tricks are for kids, And these motherfuckers got you tricked. I heard people try to get all deep and heavy. Yeah, you see the blood moon and blah, 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 blah. And that shit all sounded like Charlie Brown to me. Blah, 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 blah. I didn't hear nobody say anything beneficial about how you could do spiritual work. I heard everybody talk about doomsday and, oh, what this represents. If it wasn't, it was the do's and the don'ts. It's ridiculous. I didn't hear nobody give anything productive about that shit. Okay? So if you are seeing images of anything, it's a clear-cut explanation of why you would see this in your spiritual work. People always say, I was doing work with Bilal, and I saw Bilal like this. And at some point, you had various different images that either created that image, or that image you might be able to connect with something you have seen. Because remember this, your subconscious mind is like the hard drive on a computer. I've said this many times before over the years. It stores all the information there. Right? It keeps it all there. It's there. You have the ability to access it. Everything from a young child to the present moment, it's there. It's stored on that hard drive called the subconscious mind. But if you can't make order out of it, just like a hard drive can be overloaded with too much information, it can be damaged. It can be destroyed if you don't know what you're doing. Okay? So this is the approach. So what I'm going to do now is it's kind of what I wanted to touch on. I'm going to go through some questions and some comments, time permitting. If anybody has any questions or comments, I would encourage everybody. It looks like, hit the subscribe button, the like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the notification bell, and the drop down of the notification bell, hit all notifications. So you do get all notifications. I think you get the point. So I wanted to come on here and demystify the spookism of this blood moon bullshit. Remember, you are always the master, the god or the goddess that's in charge and control. No blood moon, no planet, no Mercury retrograde. None of that shit can control you unless you accept and believe in your mind that it can. It's that simple. I know there's going to be other people who might have a complete difference of opinion, and they're entitled to it, just like I'm entitled to it too. I can only speak on my experience. I found all that to be a bunch of bullshit. So maybe you're there at that level, maybe you're not, but that's up for you. That's up to you to make that decision. All right. So let me come up. I'll kind of go in order. All right. So I'll try to look at some of the questions that are related to Strawberry Chef says, never heard of the blood moon. That's interesting. It's nothing new. It's been around in spiritual systems for years. All right. Quick questions. What else we got here? If you got questions, type them in now, because once I get to the end, it's the wrap. Is everybody familiar with the recent law act that passed to do away with leap year or day? How does that affect magic? That's a good question. It doesn't. Okay. It affects their bullshit, their system of control, because now maybe that question came, or maybe you came in later. It doesn't affect magic at all, because time is, like I said, linear time. Their calculation of linear time through their false Gregorian calendar that was founded by Pope Gregory the Great is fictitious. It doesn't exist. We control time as magicians, because time is just contracting and expanding, like I said earlier. So it only affects those who live in accordance and are controlled by linear time, a beginning and an end, and this false cycle that doesn't make any sense. Because here's why I say, and I've talked about this over the years, here's why I say it doesn't affect any of us that are doing magic. Because when you look at how linear time is calculated, you got to look at seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years. There's a serious imbalancement across the board through all of them, right? There's 60 seconds in a minute, right? 7 days in a week, 24 hours in a day. Then it starts to get out of whack, because some months have 28 or 29 days, some have 30 or 31 days, right? So now it starts to get a little bit out of whack, and you start to get thrown off, etc. But you have to go back to seconds. Because if you could truly measure or calculate time, there's a huge problem. And years ago, the reason why they left analog clocks and they left a lot of analog and went to digital wasn't just because technology advanced. It's because they were showing you something on that the old clocks. And I've talked about this, mentioned this off and on over the years. And mostly you only see these old secondhand clocks in usually government places like maybe the post office, schools, places like that. They're pretty much non-existent everywhere else. Everybody pretty much is dealing with digital or other forms of technology when it comes to clocks and time. But as I said before, when you look at the second hand, right, which is a mistake, they call it a second hand because it's seconds, and it should be firsts, not seconds, because when you look at the second hand as it goes around a clock, it goes tick, right? We hear the term tick-tock. But in between the tick and the tock, there's a pause. There's a tick, it stops, and then it goes tock. Who's calculating the space of time or pause in between the tick and the tock? So how can there really be 60 seconds in a minute, right? We would have to add a whole nother 60 in there, and that gives you 120. That breaks down to the number 3. I can keep going on because there's numerology that unlocks this, right? So there's a space or a pause between the tick and the tock. So time is not, from right out the gate, through their false system of calculating seconds, is incorrect. It doesn't exist. It's not a reality, right? We vibrate in our level of spirituality and understanding between the tick and the tock. That's what they don't understand. Our existence is in between all of that space or that void that's not being calculated between the tick and the tock. That's where the demons, the gods, the goddesses, the realm of the void and the abyss exists. Why? Because it's not being calculated. Remember what I said, the void and the abyss has no parameters, no beginning, no end. There's no linear time that governs it. They told you this even in your religious books. I think it's in the first book of Peter. One day the Lord is like 1,000 years or some shit like that. I can't recall. It's in there. You guys are probably familiar with it. They tried to tell you many times, even in religion, that linear time is bullshit. How do you also know that? Because that same character, Jesus, said over 2,000 years ago, I'm leaving, but I'll be back soon. I don't know about you guys, but over 2,000 years, that's not soon, okay? Soon to me is maybe a few minutes, a couple hours next week, a few months, maybe a year, give or take. I don't know what the definition of soon was according to that, but that shit ain't soon. That's because linear time is an illusion. So it doesn't affect us at all. They could take leap year, leapfrog year, bullfrog year, whatever they want to take away. It's not affecting us, not those who are rooted and grounded in their spirituality. That's a good question, though. Yes, and there's a good comment, too, by Multiverse Speaks. I think it's all about intention, and do you believe you can do it? However, whatever. It's always about your intent, right? And your approach to your intent. And is it practical, right? And that is a key reason why a lot of people fail at doing spiritual work and don't get results, because their intention is not in line with the outcome or the desire. So that is a very important statement, 100%. Yes, and yeah, you could, as you said earlier when I was talking about protons and electrons, you can replace that with the neutrons or the neutral energy. People can become stuck. Now, there's a science of that in the 9 angles. The 6th angle represents stasis or stagnation or being in a state of neutralness, right? Now, you can look at stasis, stagnation as good or bad, because in that stasis or stagnation, it gives the individual time to think, right? And out of that state of stasis can come growth, depending on the choice and the decision via that stasis or stagnation that individual makes. So they could take a step back in their growth, or they could take a step forward, right? So that's a good point. All right. All right, what else we got? Serpent of Mass says, I've never given any thought to moon phases or planetary alignments. The real reason I'm just pulling for God is just irrelevant to me, I guess. And it should be. Right? Not saying there isn't no scientific or astrological facts behind it, but really it is irrelevant in essence. It only has as much relevance as you feed it. But unfortunately, over the years, I've seen people approach astrology or use astrology like a Christian would a Bible. They get so fanatic with, today, my horoscope says, get the fuck out of here with that shit. Okay. So I say, if that's what your horoscope says, what are you as a God or God is going to do to make the changes if you don't like what it said? That's my next question. Yeah, see, when you're a slave to astrology, that's the bullshit you fall for. Venus is in retrograde, or Mercury is in retrograde. Well, this is where crazy stuff is going on. So you believe that, and that's your reality. I don't believe any of that shit, and I don't use any of it either, and you're completely right. It is irrelevant. All right. Yes, and another good comment by Multiverse Speaks. Unresolved conflict is in beneficial chaos. It's just how you approach it, how you perceive it, and it can become a very beneficial thing if you master it and make order out of it. But it all serves a purpose, right? What do we got here? Eric Jones says, how do you channel the subconscious mind into the conscious at will? Well, it's a process, right? Step one, obviously, as I said earlier, I'm not sure what time you came on, uncovering the shadow or the hidden self would be step one, because you need to see what is ingrained in that subconscious mind, good and bad, right? And to unlock it and do as you described, you must first see the good and the bad that's there. There's going to be some good things, some powerful things, some strong points, but then you must also unlock what psychological residue, mental and emotional trauma and weaknesses are there, so you can perfect, master, and address them. Once you have both of those things working in harmony, then you start to make that shift, right? Into that description that you described, being able to do it at will. You'll also be able to do things like, let's just say people always astral traveling, spiritual things that might take long, time-consuming, ritualistic practices to obtain, start to become easier. Because what makes it easier? Because once your spiritual vibration and frequency is in alignment, in order for you to unlock, for an example, what people call opening the pineal gland or the crown chakra, a decalcification process has to take place. All those things that are making you dense or calcifying you are removed and you're made less dense, and the spiritual frequency vibration starts to speed up, right? You become more in alignment. As I said many times before over the years, the Matrix movies was trying to show you that, right? The Matrix movies was trying to show you that there is no above and below. There's no heaven and hell. The spiritual planes are interwoven around you. And there's a veil of an illusion that's right in front of you that you can't penetrate due to your pineal being calcified through all systems of programming, indoctrination via religion, media, entertainment, movies, conspiracy theories. All of these are things that make us less dense, fears, anxieties, all of these things create that matrix that they talk about in the Matrix movies. And it showed you what we're calling the spiritual realm is not above us. It's not in layers. It's interwoven around you. You just can't see it, or you can't tap into it due to that calcification process, right? So it's a process. Hopefully that pushes you in the right direction. I show people this, again, in the shadow work class. We're going to start, and we have begun some work where we use spiritual alchemy is the best form to start getting yourself shifted in that direction, right? This is the goal, to get everybody to that point, but you got to put in the work, right? All right. Take a couple more here and I'm gonna wrap this up. Serpent Headed Man says, where is the banishing part in the casting of the Hermetic Circle? There is no banishing part. As I said before, just so we're clear, there is no banishing in the Hermetic Circle. You are invoking, and let me explain. When you're invoking the triad of light and darkness, you're going to the 4 points first, and then you're going to each point in between, which creates the 8-pointed star of chaos. Casting the Hermetic Circle, you are tapping in, you are invoking all aspects of primordial chaos. You're including in that 8-pointed or that circle light and darkness, because you need both light and darkness for that inner harmony. You need both the forces of light and darkness. So that's why the triad of light, who represents Usia or Osiris, Horus or Heru, Isis and Aset, that would be your triad of light, your lighter forces or energy. And then you have the triad of darkness, right? Which will be your darker forces of energy, which represent Set at the top point, Ampu or Anubis to the left, and then you have Sekhmet to the right. Both of those are the representation of the inner harmony that the Black Adept needs within them. You need light and darkness, which ties into the higher sciences of Luciferian magic and witchcraft, because Lucifer, the light bearer, embodies light and darkness simultaneously. He represents that intellect on that level that the individual needs, he or she, to master themselves, right? This is an important concept to understand and grasp. So there is no banishing aspect in casting the Hermetic Circle. And then what's the second part? I don't ever recall doing that anytime I perform it, or would skip that part of recognizing. I'm trying to think where that is. All right, you can find it in the Necrominion book by Michael W. Ford, Set, the Fury of Egypt. I think that's by Bill Davenduck or Asenet Mason, but it's a draconian ritual book. I've actually, you're on Patreon. If you go back go back in the archives to any of the Egyptian rituals we did. I think there's one with Anubis on there, with Set. The harmonization rite of Ma'at that was done at the end of the year, I believe it's on there. So if you want to actually see how it's performed, and I know you're on Patreon tier 3, go into the archives, and I've actually done it on there in rituals. You'll see it actually performed on there, right? Now, I'm not sure, you might have looked at a version or interpretation of it, I don't know. But that, looking at it from more of a left-hand path occult perspective, that's how we use it. It's casting the 8-pointed star of chaos. And there's no banishing in that ritual performed. You're not destroying or eliminating any energy, right? And then you go on to say, source conduit, it gets absorbed, not banished into the ritual space. That's correct. And within you, but beneficially, the last part with Sekhmet devours the energy into you. That's correct, because Sekhmet is the last one that's invoked, and it's very intense and powerful, right? It starts with Set, Ampu is in the middle, and then you have Sekhmet. So that's correct. You're absorbing it. Again, we're not trying to banish or destroy. We are actually invoking it and absorbing it and bringing it into our consciousness. Right now, there is a sweeping of the above and below, but you're closing. So in essence, what you're doing is that personal space at your altar, it's like a vortex within a vortex. That is your own spiritual realm. Nothing can penetrate it if you've done it correctly. And for those that know what I'm talking about and have experience, will describe that type of effect. It's a very powerful practice. I have students in the mentorship program who have reached the Egyptian Hecateer after their self-initiation, and it's a practice they use regularly on their second level work. And I get so much different feedback about it. So it's a very powerful, effective practice, but you're not banishing. You're actually invoking, drawing and calling forth and absorbing those energies. Correct. All right, what else we got here? Hold on, skipped. Damn. Okay, left off here. Transmutation, whether the energy is from within or perceived outwardly, the light and dark Egyptian deities combined act as a battery. That's a good way to look at it, the battery metaphor for the space, positive and negative. That's great, because when you look, like for an example, on a battery, or like even more specific, a car battery, right? It needs a positive and a negative charge in order for the battery to function correctly. So yes, you need both. Contrary to what religions and lesser systems taught us for years. Oh, suppress all that dark, intense stuff. No, meditate it away, pray it away, avoid it, sweep it under the rug. No, we're not trying to do that, because we know you need both. It was like, I think it was the second to last Star Wars movie. I talked about that all the time, where Luke Skywalker is living as a hermit up in the mountains. And he was up there for years, conflicted. He realized he was chasing an illusion his whole life with this Jedi light bearer love, peace and love shit, because he came to the conclusion you need the balancement or the formula of darkness, the dark force with the light force. And he was almost conflicted about it because it took him for years to come to that realization. It's the same thing with this, no different. Yes, you can't do magic whenever. Joshua X, I will get with you on that. I believe we agreed in July for that, but we have to talk further on it. There's more we have to go over, but we'll talk about that on the side. I'm not going to discuss that here. All right. Multiverse speaks says I do magic based on my energy and intentions, no doubt. All right. Let me see what other questions are here because I can only take a few more. I got to get out of here soon. There was something here. Okay, here we go. All right, Slim Lewis has a question. What would you say are some of the most common mistakes people make who aren't beginners, but who only have a few years into connecting with demons and doing rituals with demons regularly? Again, the very, very simple, straightforward answer. The most common mistake I'd see people doing is they're focused more on their wants than their needs. It's that simple. So people, their wants, they come in, some have this, and they could be not spanking new. I'm talking about they could be doing this for a bit of time, whether it's a year, 2 years, a few years. They're focused on materialistic shit all the time, or they're confused, or they think that what they're doing is the critical things that need to be addressed in their life. They might be focusing on love matters, situations, and ignoring issues that need immediate attention in their life. Could be personal problems, relationship problems, family problems, emotional problems, blockages. And how you can avoid falling into that trap. If you are doing consistent shadow work, your shadow work will guide you and point you into the correct direction of what type of work you should be doing. And I'm showing people how to do that in the shadow work class. But that is the most common reason why people just do shit. They immediately gravitate towards shit they like, and they don't even have an understanding. Just because you like a deity or you feel you want to do exclusive work with that deity or you feel you read a book on that, that doesn't mean that's necessarily what you're supposed to be doing at that time. So people chase their wants more than their needs. If you are doing correct shadow work, you will be more in alignment to focusing on your needs, and then therefore your intent will be directed towards those needs. That's the most common mistake, trust me. All right. All right, what else we got? Eric Jones, how is the monkey connected to the primal chaos energy? I woke up beating my chest like one after demonic integration work one night. Well, I can tell you now again, obviously that's a personal subjective experience, but I can tell you this. The baboon deity is affiliated with the lunar energies and the moon, and it also ties into the scribe Tahuti in ancient Egypt. He's also synonymous with the baboon or the lunar deity, right? Now, why per se, and because we know the lunar also deals with those chaotic energies, that may not be the exact reason, but that's more subjective. You're probably going to have to dig deeper to get that answer. Could be a multitude of reasons. We would have to do deviation. We'd have to dig deeper. So I don't want to just speculate, but I can tell you there is a connection on the surface there with the baboon or the monkey when it comes to the lunar or the chaotic energies via Tahuti and the lunar cycle, right? And we know the lunar cycle deals with chaotic energies. It's where they get the word, obviously, lunatic, right? So hopefully that points you in the right direction. Logan Scott says, if you're experiencing high levels of volatile emotions and thoughts coupled with confusion and uncertainty on a daily basis, how does one begin to tip the scales and reestablish harmony and balance? Again, got to go back to shadow work. You need to uncover what's the root cause of those volatile emotions, because there's something there in the subconscious mind that is causing those emotions. It's not just happening for a reason. And when you're doing shadow work and you uncover that, and there's, again, time, I can't get into it here, but do any shadow work rituals or work with any deities or archetypes that unlock or remove those blockages, and you can get answers to those questions. That's step one. Again, a lot of the root causes of a lot of the questions that you guys are asking ties heavily into doing shadow work or lack of not doing shadow work, right? And then once you identify those areas, That's when you could start designing ritual work to create that harmony / balancement and get it back, right? Because now you've identified exactly what it is, and now you'll be clearer, excuse me, in your approach, and your intent will be in alignment with your needs and not your. That's what I was talking about. So a lot of these questions are tied into each other, right? Okay. You says, how can one use astrology in the best way? As information to help understand yourself and how to utilize your power, right? As I said before, if you're doing ritualistic work, let me take for an example, candle magic, right? Candle magic's big on using astrological signs, the planetary movements, the movement of the sun, and the effects in the planetary movements or effects of the waxing and waning of the moon, all those different astrological things, astrological signs in accordance with the planets and your birth astrological. So it can, whether you want to even get into, your birth and your natal chart, right? Which is helpful information to help you understand yourself, but it's not to tell all be all, where some people look at their birth and their natal chart, or they use daily astrology almost like to dictate to them everything they should and should not do. That's religion. So that's the way you shouldn't use it. So your astrological birth sign, your natal, your birth chart, and using astrological practices in your ritual work should be used at your discretion, and it should only be used to enhance your power, not to use those that astrological information or astrology as a do and don't and a control. Like I said, most astrologists will tell you don't do anything when the planet is influenced in Jupiter, and I found that to be pure bullshit. I've gotten tremendous results working when the planet was highly influenced by Jupiter energy. But most spirits will tell you, no, you don't do anything. That's not the time to invoke any type of change. Bullshit. As I said, it all goes back to you. You are the power source. You are the god or goddess that's in control. You control the elements. They don't control you unless you allow it or you believe it. So it should just be used as knowledge to help you understand yourself and how to harness your power. That's it. What else we got? Oh, man. So Logan Scott, yes, you said you've been experiencing this as you've been diving into your shadow work and become aware of issues I have in questioning who myself to be. This is a very normal process. So now that you've becoming aware of these issues, you now need to work with deities or spirits that connect with removing those issues. So start creating meditations, invocations, whether it's sigil work, whatever, basic invocations, and invoke some of those spirits or demons that can resolve and assist you in opening up your psyche to get clarity on how to deal with those issues. So you're there. So I didn't see that. This is the second part of your comment to your first question. So you're there. You just need now to design work and put it into practice. So you're right there. It's a very normal thing because that's the first step. So now it's about designing work and moving in that direction to resolve it. All right. Okay. So you serpent-headed mask, you have done it. Okay. The Hermetic circle. All right. Multiverse. Is it true? This is Multiverse Speaks. Is it true that Lucifer and Satan are one and the same or just two different vibrations of energy? How do they both equally provide the transformational growth and needed? Remember, the adversary has many different masks, right? So you're looking, it's multiple deific masks of the same thing because they represent different aspects of the same thing. So let me give you an example. Satan or Satanas is the adversary, right? Why is he referred to as the adversary? When you're working with the deific mask of Satan or Satanas, you're taking on a non-conformist aspect. You're looking through the eyes of the mask of the adversary, who is adversarial nature. That's the root or the foundation of what the deific mask of the adversary Satan or Lucifer represents, right? Now you could even go into the different, there's not just one deific mask of Lucifer, there's Lucifer, Lord of Air, right? There's a sorceress aspect of Lucifer. There's Emperor, there's Lucifer, Emperor of Hell. That's an aspect that deals with unlocking some of the deep psychological or hidden aspects of your subconscious mind. Lucifer, Emperor of Heaven and Hell, right? There's Mephistopheles, right? That deals with it's like a trickster form of Lucifer that brings out the divinity or the divine in you via challenges. Not that it tricks you, but it's a whole nother deific mask, right? Beelzebub, the Lord of Flies, right? The list can go on and on. They're attributes or masks or representation of the archetype in different elements. They're all connected because it's all part of the adversarial current, but they represent different facets or fragments of the adversarial path. And when you're saying Satanas or Satan, you're saying the adversary. So Satan as a whole, or what the concept Satan represents the adversarial current as a whole. And everything proceeds forward from that adversarial covenant. Because here's the deep thing. When you look at that word, which really goes back to religion in biblical times, right? The word Satan or adversary was not limited just to the character Satan in the Bible. Anytime somebody had an adverse opinion, you got to go back into the Hebrew to see it, Satanas or Satan. When you look in the either in the Greek and then you take it back to the Hebrew, that title was not limited to the character that they call Satan. It described an action as a whole. Okay, so hopefully that helps you. So you're looking at multiple deific masks of the same thing. Yeah, let me give you a better example to understand that. It's like you can look into Ifa for an example. Most people get confused. They think there's one Shango, there's one Obatala. There's been many personifications, right? That's because when you look at in those systems, there's different paths of the same deity, but they all represent the same deity, right? Shango has multiple paths. Oshun, Obatala, right? It's the same thing when people study ancient Egypt. They think there was one Tahuti. Tahuti was many manifestations of Tahuti because anytime an individual was raised up to a certain level of consciousness in the mystery of that deity, they became a Tahuti. So this is why when you look in history, there was, Pharaoh was the utmost, the first, Tahuti, the second, the third, the fourth, and fifth. It just means they attained that certain level. There was many different incarnations of the same deity, right? Because that energy can house many different bodies at multiple times. Right. So we get caught up sometimes in the literalness of it. Right. And we're looking at multiple deific masks is my whole point. All right. So hopefully that helps. Intuitive Instinct says, any advice on me not having a desire to practice my craft anymore? I feel I've evolved past candles and a lot of stuff. Well, you don't need any of that stuff. You can keep doing. Here's the deep thing. Remember, candles, ritual tools, and altars, those are just objects that are used as focal points in imagery to enhance the energy of a ritual. I've said this many times over the years. Are they necessary? Absolutely not. You can just sit down anywhere outside, anywhere in your home, on your front porch, on an airplane, in a park, and you can create and do a whole entire ritual in your mind. Because it is all mental at the end of the day. And it's the power of your visualization and your intellect that really determines how powerful you are. Even though you may not be into the tangible objects like candles and stuff as you described, you still have to educate yourself. You still have to enhance your intellect. So if that's just meditating, studying, whatever practices you feel outside of that, you just go with your intuition and your vibe. You don't necessarily need to use candles and actual physical altars. You just go as you're evolving and as you're laying out your own path to self-mastery, just follow that path. And whatever manifests from that, you go with it because you're manifesting it and creating it yourself. So you develop that how you see fit based on how you're evolving and how you're growing, right? Oh, what else we got? All right, so TSRC number 41. If everything is energy, frequencies, and vibrations, then wouldn't that imply that the concept of duality is the last hurdle of illusions to overcome? Now, even when you look into 7 Hermetic principles, the principle of duality, right? It's still vibration and frequencies because duality is just different vibrational frequencies of the same thing. You also have to factor in when the doctrine of vibration or the doctrine of polarity also has to be factored in there. Because when we talk about duality, right, and you even look in, say, in Egypt, Sekhem, or you look in martial arts where they talk about the yin and the yang, right? it's when they say that there is duality to everything but we have to also factor in the hurdle to getting over understanding true duality is perception and how one perceives what that duality is. And that's going to vary from individual to individual, because perception is also based on how the person views and absorbs that vibrational frequency. Because we could have multiple people looking at the same thing, or we could be having a discussion about the same thing, and there might be 7, 8, 9, 10 different perceptions based on how the person absorbed the vibrational frequency of what is being either looked at, discussed, or experienced. So we have to also factor how one overcomes that hurdle is how one has developed their perception and understanding of these things. That's how you overcome that hurdle, right? And it's going to, again, vary from individual to individual. It's not going to be the same thing. Steve Nunez, I'll be honest with you, maybe you're spelling it different, or maybe I'm not familiar with the way you spelled ta'ert, because I know there could be various, that could be a Greek spelling. I can't really answer that because I'm not sure. Maybe the way you're describing, I'm not sure what ta'ert is. I'd have to look at that. So maybe you can get some more clarity, so I don't want to speculate. Okay, man, I'm glad that helped, Multiverse. All right, yeah. Okay, Intuitive Sings, thank you so much. Yes, because when I'm directly outdoors, I get stuff to moving trees. Yeah, because it's your mind anyway. The most powerful altar you have is your mind. And it's funny that you bring this question up, because with some students that are in the mentorship program on Patreon, they don't realize when they get to a point, I'm trying to show them there's an objective way to do your rituals, and the objective via altars, but you must get yourself to the point. I've said on old videos going back, you could be driving in your car and tap into alpha state and do a ritual while you're driving. You don't need no altar, no candles, no incense, none of that stuff. If you're into that, that's fine. I like the traditional aspect of it when I have the time to do it, because it's just a personal connection that enhances the vibe and energy. But is it necessary or mandatory? Absolutely not. So if that's how you're working your path and it's working, here's the other thing. This is what I want to say to everybody based on TSRC's questions and comment. If you're doing something and it's working for you and you're getting results, don't let nobody change that. That's simple. Regardless if it's not in alignment with mainstream, if it's not in alignment with everybody else is doing, or if it's not in alignment with somebody else who just can't understand it or get it. If it's working, you keep at it, you keep doing it, you perfect it, you make it better. Now, if you're doing shit and it's not working, you also need to be real with yourself and say, I need to make some adjustments and some changes. It's that simple. If you're getting the results, stay at it, regardless of what anybody thinks. All right. Having said that, I'm going to wrap this up, but real quick again, check out the Patreon page, patreon.com/Baniti, Baniti. It's where I do private classes, rituals. I have mentorship programs on there. One of them is closed up. I have too many people in there. I can't take any more. You'll see when you go on there. But I do recommend Tier 3 to start out with, which gives you access to all the monthly classes, which is 2 or 3 a month, and the monthly ritual. It's a very good tier to really help you develop your path in addition to what you're doing. And there's a boatload of classes and information on there that can be very helpful. Check that out. If you need to reach me for a spiritual reading or a consultation, everything I offer is right there in the description box. Shoot me an email. Put in that email the days and times you're available and the time zone you're in. Because keep in mind, I do readings for people in other countries. I got one this Thursday from somebody in Singapore. I've done people in Israel, Europe, all parts of Europe, Great Britain, London, Belgium, and then the different time zones in the United States. So it's very important you include that information so we can find a time that works for you. Support the platforms, Primordial Chaos 9 on Instagram. Shout out to everybody that did tune in and out on Instagram, here on YouTube, and Facebook, Primordial Chaos. We will be soon, spoke with Brother Taja, we will have an upcoming hip hop occult show soon. We've been off that for a while, but we're getting back on that. We should have something, a set time and date for that next show. I know some of you guys been emailing me when we're going to do the next show. We should have something coming up soon. Other than that, I appreciate everybody's support, and we will talk soon. Infernal blessings to all. All right, let me end this.